This episode was produced and mixed by Nicola Clausen and Mylan Tatusis, with additional administrative and production support from Daryl Lucero and Peyton Jackson. If you like what we do, please like, subscribe, and share. You could find us on Facebook and Instagram at The Radical Narrative Podcast. If you wish to contact us, our website is www.radicalnarrative.com.
This is a large-scale freehand ink drawing. It's part of an installation I've been working on for the past 9 months. I have 17 of these portraits finished so far, and this is just a preview of how it'll be exhibited out in the environment. Really happy with this. This installation's about the spectrum of Indigenous female identity.
Welcome to another episode of Radical Narrative. I am your host, Mylan Tatusis. Today I'm sitting down with April Holder. She is an artist and a citizen of the Sac and Fox Nation of Oklahoma. She also has some heritage of the Tonkawa and Wichita people. She's an Institute of American Indian Arts alumni graduate. We actually went to college together in Santa Fe, New Mexico for a number of years. Tonight we're going to talk about what she's doing and how she's contributing to intergenerational art that centers Indigenous women. Not only do we talk about her art, we also talk about the art market in general and what it's like to go to the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico, a U.S. tribal college. This is for all you creatives out there who are thinking about art or going to art school, so make sure you stay tuned and listen in. Yeah, it's been a while since we talked, April, but we actually went to college together for a number of years, and I think you graduated before me.
Yes, I did. I graduated in 2008.
Yeah, and I think I graduated 2011, 2012. But I remember you the first few years because you were an older student and you were doing art, and for me as like a res kid moving to Santa Fe, New Mexico and just encountering art firsthand, it was really cool to see you and that generation that was involved in creating the Humble, which we'll talk about and maybe touch on later, and just expressing yourself in this creative way. And I think it influenced me a lot because for me as a scholar today, I base a lot of what I do on the fact I went to art school, on the fact that I was around creatives all the time, and it shows up in my work. But I want to position you, like go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself, who you are, where you come from, in your own way.
Okay, so my name is April Holder. I am a Sac and Fox Sock from Oklahoma, from the Sac and Fox Nation of Oklahoma. I grew up in a town called Shawnee, Oklahoma, and I have a background also with a family being Tonkawa and Wichita as well.
Cool.
And so, yeah, I'm just an Okie kid.
Yeah, from Oklahoma.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool. It's cool because I know a lot of our audience is predominantly from like Saskatchewan and Alberta and British Columbia. So it's I really want to foster, some transboundary conversations. And that's part of why I said, hey, I should sit down with April. She's doing some badass work. So what are you doing in terms of work right now?
So just recently, actually, just in March, I finished up a year-long residency I did in Cuesta, New Mexico. And while I was there, I basically committed this past year to making a variety of work. I worked on some painting, I worked on some printmaking, but my main focus was I created an installation of large-scale ink drawings on bed sheets, mixed media work. That is a full encompassing installation about the spectrum of female Indigenous identity. And so what I did was I basically had this concept quite a while ago and just didn't really have the means or the space to bring it to fruition until recently, whenever I came out back to New Mexico for this residency. And it was so weird. I came out here in March of 2020, beginning of March, and it was right as the pandemic was hitting.
Wow, yeah.
And so this work, I had like the first like concept was like, this is about like Indigenous women. And then throughout the course of the year, each piece, as I would contact these individuals and have dialogue with them, and of course ask for consent to, produce their image as part of this installation piece, it started taking on a whole new life. And then I started kind of really feeling the gravity of what I was doing with it, because it started becoming very clear to me that a lot of people have a very narrow view of what Indigenous female identity is, or even just Indigenous femininity and female identified individuals. And we have we as artists have the opportunity to be our own storytellers and to really take control of that history. And so that's what I was trying to do with the work.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. That sounds amazing. I'm gonna I'll link to some photos in the show notes so people could see some of the work you've done in general, and so they could get a better picture of what we're talking about here. Because for me, I always remember your paintings. Like, I always remember your paintings and how they existed, and it was always amazing to see. Because I remember you were doing like bigger work when if I think back in college, and I know you developed as an artist since then, and I seen what's on your Instagram. But just in terms of like art in general and paintings, it's like a big concept to define, right? Because you're talking about, wanting to assert, Indigenous womanhood in these art pieces you're working on. And then I heard you say that, sometimes people misinterpret what that being an Indigenous woman is to a certain extent. Like I'm just thinking about what you just said. But at the same time, people often also misinterpret what art is, right? Like, just in general, right? And art is a big concept, and for me, it's really hard to define even what Indian art is, right? Because a lot of that is defined by the settler gaze or by white art collectors. But how would you define what you're doing? Because you're defining this process of you doing this residency in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico, and working on this big concept, and it's so much more than just the hobby art, so to speak. It's so much more than just like the quick buck type of art. There's so much involvement in your process.
Right. So for me, whenever I undertake this type of work, it's so much of it is very, it starts out very conceptual based. And so art becomes something to me, and it's always rooted in communication, right? It's always rooted in, like I said, that storytelling, that narrative. I didn't want to just present this visual language of here's portraits of Indigenous women from all over the country. Like, it wasn't going to be something merely just that like physical representation of their imagery. I wanted to communicate that these are women I love dearly. These are women that have changed the course of my life. These are women that have taught me, that have inspired me, that these are the women that are going to teach my daughter things that I'll never be able to in my lifetime. So when I approach making the work, it is so much of a conceptual and even somewhat of a metaphysical undertaking of relationship, of communication. And I guess that's part of it too, is that I did not approach this work thinking I didn't approach it completely thinking, well, how will non-Native people perceive this? I approached it thinking, how are our little Indigenous children going to receive this? How are other Indigenous women, femmes, female identified individuals going to receive this? How are they going to see themselves mirrored in these individuals? How are they going to feel seen themselves in this work? How is it going to make them feel comforted and held, and also how is it going to allow them to say we don't have to conform to what stereotypes project of us. We don't have to play by a rule of a patriarchal identity of where we're supposed to be in life and who we're supposed to be in life. And so, and that's, I mean, all of this was part of the thought process. That's why it was, ended up being 17 different individuals that gave me permission to do their portrait work. And then even once I completed those pieces, I realized that this is really an ongoing series. Like, this work will never really be complete.
Yeah.
It'll never be done as long as I can continue to encounter these remarkable human beings, these remarkable, like I said, women and female individuals, and learn from them and impart part of our lives together.
Yeah.
I can continue to do this work, So I guess that's where it's so hard, because like you said, sometimes we think of art as that European construct of here's a piece and you put it on a wall and you view it in this environment, in this atmosphere, whether it's like a museum or a gallery. And there's all this sort of rhetoric and protocol upon what this thing is in the context of what it exists. And for me, when I start to create work, it's never just one painting, and it's never just one drawing. It's never just one sculpture, installation, or anything. It's ongoing. It's like life itself. It's constantly moving and in flux and changing. And so I can't ever look at something as just an individual piece.
Yeah.
And once you stop looking at art as like, oh, this is an individual piece, well, then you stop looking at it as, well, this is an individual sale of art. Yeah. This is an individual exhibit of art. This is an individual way of, perceiving things. Like you start really looking at how cyclical time is and how you create, and it becomes, to me, it becomes something much more natural in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm loving what you're saying about this, and I've missed these conversations, and this is what I mean when I say, as a scholar, going to an art school and hanging around artists had a big influence on me, is because we take conversations to this level, and we're only like 15 minutes, not even 10 minutes into the podcast, right? And I miss this space. Like, I miss being in a creative space with creatives, because it really allows you to reflect and get to the core of an object, or even just the commentary of an object or the goal. Because what's standing out for you, or what's standing out to me right now, hearing you describe these pieces you developed, is it's coming across to me as intergenerational, because you even said, people who are going to be teaching my daughter when I'm no longer here. And for me, as having a daughter, I'm thinking like, oh, this is badass art, because this is speaking to me as a father raising a young daughter, right? And that's amazing. Like, that's amazing. I'm loving what I'm hearing right now. And again, we'll link the pieces in the show notes so people could see what we're talking about. And you're describing your process. You're describing it and taking it to that level. And then, so what's the drive for it? Like, I know you're highlighting some of it, but if we were to sum that up and really hit home what the drive of, what is the drive and the process for the art you do, how would we describe that straightforward for people?
Okay, so the drive for it, I guess, is that I am unavoidably an artist. I will unavoidably create work and create these, like I said, contribute to these narratives of people and of who they are and how they interact in life with me and with others. And so that's really the drive, is that, like, I can't pinpoint a specific drive. It's just that I will forever unavoidably be an artist.
Yeah.
And so, that's like asking, why do we take breaths? Yeah. It's part of life. It's part of existence. Yeah. And I feel like for a lot of Native American artists, it's the same way. It's, people will say that. They'll say, well, why did you want to grow up and become an artist?
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of Native artists who are like, I was born this way.
Yeah.
I was born to create. So that's a big part of it. And then also, if you want to look at it in like a more, I guess, academic, like, environment or context, I realized a long time ago that when I walk into galleries and museums
Mm-hmm.
and these institutions of art, I didn't see any women that look like me.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at these walls and these spaces and these buildings that were built on our indigenous lands, and my presence wasn't welcome there.
Mm-hmm.
I could see it in every part of those environments. And as I got older, and like you said, when you become a parent, it definitely changes how you think about things. I realized that I need to do what I can to help reclaim that space, not for myself and not just for these different women that I've done these portraits of, but for our children.
Mm-hmm.
I want our children to walk into these spaces and know they have every right to be there.
Yeah.
That is their home. That is where they belong. Other people are guests here. This is their space, and they are more than welcome to express themselves to the fullest extent in those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of what is, I guess, if you want to call it a drive, that's part of the personal movement for me and what I do.
Yeah. I like it. I really like it. Yeah, I really like it, and this speaks to me too on multiple levels, because the reclamation or the reclaiming of that space, or even just asserting our presence in those spaces, for me, like, just in terms of my scholarship, for me that is an act of decolonization, being who we are and asserting ourselves in those spaces. And it sounds too like you're even critiquing the space itself, right? Like even the fact that settlers are determining the art market and they're determining the space. They determine who makes it and who doesn't. And even for you to visually describe, that artist didn't look like you. I mean, they're even determining how artists look, right? Like who they're gonna go with. Like, and a lot of people don't see the underbelly of the art world in this way. They look at marketability. Right. They look at how well, like, Western white European standards translate into Indian art market. And then people who replicate that often get uplifted higher than those who are doing some badass art that's really disrupting things, right? So there's a lot to what you're saying here that we could probably talk about for hours, but I really want our listeners just to begin to understand, that there's more to art than what we're seeing on magazines and what we're seeing in mainstream media and things like that. Yeah.
Yes. And like if I were to try to describe, I guess, some of the work I do is I would love for, like I said, Indigenous youth, Indigenous women, Indigenous femmes, Indigenous queer, non-binary folk who are female identified, all those who this work can resonate with on a personal level. I want them to see the work and feel comforted and feel at home and feel very much welcomed in those spaces where they see it. Yeah. For anyone who is not that, and for anyone who's non-native or who are not these people who are part of that colonialized, that settler colonial history that created those art institutions, I want them to be very uncomfortable. That's what I want. And I think that's part of the work too. Yeah. I want them to see it and know that, like, maybe you're not welcomed in every space. Maybe this is ours. Maybe this work was not made for your gaze, and you need to be okay with that. Yeah. And when we talk about like reclamation and decolonizing, it's exactly that. It doesn't have to be nice. It doesn't have to be in the most polite, peaceful way of saying it. If I make people uncomfortable, if people who are non-native, who are non-indigenous see my work and it makes them kind of uneasy, good. Yeah. That's the least I can do. That's the least I can do. And also, a lot of times we make work as artists and it's not even made for like even this generation to fully take in. Yeah. I look at my daughter. She is always with me in my space I create. I welcome her in my studio space whenever I'm working. I've normalized always having my child there with me, because that's also a part of colonialism. They try to separate women from motherhood, from workspace, from creativity. They try to compartmentalize all of it as if it's not all the same being. And I don't do that. My child has always been actively with me in my creative space, and she's grown in that space with me. And I know what she sees of my work now, it doesn't resonate with her. But my child, when she is 40, 50, 60 years down the line, I hope she sees it, and then it hits her in those places she needs to feel it in life.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not made for right now. That's okay.
Yeah.
It is for later on in life. And we got to think about that as artists too. Totally. In relationship to like what an art market or scene is. You know, people talk about that like, oh, so-and-so doesn't get enough appreciation or recognition. And it's like, because we haven't all caught up to where they're at yet.
Yeah.
You know, they're way ahead of us. You know, give it time, and people will come around and see like the real scope of what other people are doing.
Yeah. 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 And that's what stood out to me is you're talking about your art in an intergenerational way. Like it's an intergenerational project. I was just thinking too, like, when you describing how your daughter's present in your creative spaces, our daughter, me and Wakia's daughter, is present all the time. Like she's literally like, always literally here climbing on my desk and stuff. And I remember thinking just recently that, she's going to listen to these podcasts one day and she's going to be hearing my voice, like hearing me now as a 34-year-old, male, her father talking to you. And then your daughter's probably going to listen to this episode one day too. And they're going to be hearing us talk about these things. And it's like mind boggling to me that this conversation is going to exist online forever. But at the same time, I think it's really cool when I'm seeing an artist thinking about that, intergenerational project that, maybe I'm not making this for, the person who's going to be looking at it next week. I'm making it for the person who's going to be looking at it like 60 years down the line, like you said, right? Exactly. And I feel like those projects should extend to like everything we do as Indigenous people, like everything, right? Politics, economics, and things like that. Like we definitely need to foster long-term thinking. And it's really cool you're doing that in your art. Like I'm loving what I'm hearing with everything you're saying. It's giving me chills, to be honest. Like I think I got chills twice when you were talking about it.
I believe that I agree with you, and I believe Indigenous people can do that. We can very much appreciate and love and hold the space we are in here and now, and still have that compassion to be mindful of generations to come. And be mindful that there's reasons why we don't have everything exactly the way we want it right here and right now, and there is so much intergenerational intersectionality that happens in our thought process and in our emotional process and in our emotional intellect as Indigenous people. History and the trauma and the healing we carry in both spaces of what we've experienced as Indigenous people and experiencing colonialism and the settler culture and the conditioning of white supremacy and the oppression that we felt from it. All of that, it shapes who we are now. It also shapes what we want for future generations. It also helps us and gives us insight to past generations on why they made choices in the time they were into. And so to try to communicate that, because that's a lot of information. That's a lot of information. That's why I said like the artwork, it's never just one piece. It's never just one installation. Like that's a constant, continuous dialogue of all of that information. And part of what I do is not just trying to express that to other people, but coming to terms with it myself, and seeing other people who, like I said, who've taught me, who've opened up a lot of like my heart, my mind. And, they give me a lot of space to be who I am. And I love it too, because when I've approached women and different individuals with this project, and I asked for permission, I love how they didn't treat it like they didn't understand what I was talking about, I guess. Like, I love how all of them immediately view me as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're like, oh, April, yeah, April's an artist. Like, this is what she does. There was no questioning of like, well, why are you doing this? Well, who are you to be doing this? Nothing. Yeah. It was, oh yeah, I see where this brings us closer to, and on our own personal level. But it felt really good. It felt very good for me to be seen by these beloved people in my life as an artist, you know? And because I feel like that's a challenge within itself. It's often a challenge for women, totally. for females, for femmes to be identified as distinctly as an artist. You know, because that Eurocentric art world tells us men are artists. That's what it does. I mean, we all know that women are definitely capable of it, but still that overall tone of it is related into that patriarchy of men are artists, men are the creators, men are the creatives. And so it felt really good to approach that work in that way as well.
We're going to take a short break here, and I'm going to come back to my conversation with April Holder as we talk about art and art school.
It's really cool, and I really appreciate you contextualizing this in this way, because at the same time too, we're coming at it sort of from a privileged space, because we both went to IAIA, like Institute of American Indian Arts. We both made the jump to go to an art college. I don't know why. I think I went there for creative writing, and it just so happened Indigenous Liberal Studies was starting out, and they Stephen Wall sucked me in, and now I'm doing my PhD in Indigenous Studies. But we went to those spaces, and one of the cool things about that space is we're all, I feel, coming out to college from the perspective of coming out of like colonialism. Like, it was almost like the common theme we all had in play as young students was that we're all coming from like colonialism, coming at it from, you know, the history of colonialism and colonization. And I found that art students were super aware of, you know, those dichotomies that exist, and super aware and already like understanding of trying to navigate a world that wasn't made for them, because they're creatives, right? And like how you're describing it, like how, you know, the art world is not necessarily a place for women, the Western art world. It just makes sense to me. Like, I appreciate what you're saying, because I've seen that from, like, you know, the res kid who loves to doodle in his notebook, right? Who wants to become an artist, but there's not much avenues available to them. And so it's speaking to me in that way, because I do work with kids who I know would be badass artists, right? Like, if they make that jump and dedicate time to it, they're going to be like on the next level of those doodles, you know what I mean? Or foster those to the point of where they too are intergenerational artists. And I feel that's like something that we're talking around, is the fact that we went to an arts college and we had the space and freedom to explore ideas. We had the space and freedom to, you know, be creative and even like critique art and literally critique the world we're living in through art, right? And I've seen artists do that, and it was really cool to see them do that through their different mediums. But I do feel like we're talking around it. So can we have a conversation? What was art school like for you? What was going to Institute of American Indian Arts like for you, making that jump?
That was well, that was one of my dreams.
Yeah.
Like that was one of my dreams in life to get to go to school there. That was an honor for me. That was, it's funny because like you talk about like, yeah, we were very privileged to be able to have even access to that sort of environment of just education and creativity. But I grew up in Oklahoma, and the first time I ever saw art in a museum, a painting anywhere, it was T.C. Cannon's art.
Cool. Yeah.
In a museum in Oklahoma. And I very, very vividly remember this. I was a really small child. And I loved it. I loved the color, and I loved the images, and it felt so much, it breathed the life into me. Like I had understood mark making and like the yearning to create things before, but it really like, it spoke to me and made me feel very much centered when I saw this. And so like after that, I had to know who he was and all about this work. And I learned that, this was this Caddo artist from like Gracemont, Oklahoma. And, he went out into the world and was like, I'm going to make what I'm going to make, because everywhere else in the world, they're just going to forget I was even here. And just seeing that very like vulnerable, person that was from one of our native communities that was like, yes, this isn't like none of this, this westernized art world isn't made for us. So I'm gonna make my way through it. And I learned about him, and I learned that he went to IAIA, and that was like my dream from middle school on. Was I'm going to go to IAIA. I wanted to go to the school he went to. And so I worked really hard, and I got myself there. And then I put myself through college. I worked really hard to stay there and to have that education. And it was so amazing because, of course, it was not going to be anything near like what it was like in the 60s. That was a different era and all of it. But we had access to such incredible people as far as our educators were, and then also our fellow students, our contemporaries. All of it was just mind-blowingly amazing. It's funny you mentioned Steve Wall. Steve Wall is brilliant. He was one of my favorite professors. He also mentored me, and I just appreciate him so much. And I love that on his own, he's an artist too, and so his just like, he already had that creative mindset into what he was doing. And so it wasn't just learning skill and technique and refining of form and methods and materials. It was truly an environment where people were like, we want to see you grow and thrive and come alive in ways that that are there just waiting for you. They're just, it's all just waiting for you. And we, and like I said, it was the students too. It was Michael Wesley, and it was Rose Simpson, and it was Michael Tubles, and it was all of these different people. It wasn't just visual artists. It was writers too. It was Layli Long Soldier. It was it was all of these different people, and that wealth of creativity and expression we all shared collectively. That was amazing to me. I think that's part of it too, when we talk about like Indigenous youth coming from like the res environment, from these rural Indigenous environments, communities and things. We have that wealth. We have a wealth of creativity and intellect and insight and knowledge and beauty and self-expression that the westernized world thinks they took from us. They think they robbed us of basically all the wealth we have, and we truly live in an abundance of that creativity. And so I just love how the environment of IAIA was just one of those places where we got to make it very focused. So totally.
Yeah, you're making me lonesome. Like you're making me lonesome because I do today, like in my 30s, say, oh, I was really privileged to make that jump. But you're also true in saying that it was a struggle to stay down there because it was
Hmm.
expensive. And I remember
Hmm.
like I always have these awarenesses, and Wakia J, my partner, she always laughs at my awarenesses because she kind of didn't know how rough the struggle was sometimes. Because I remember like
Hmm.
moving down there, not having a mattress when I moved off campus, so I was like
Hmm.
literally sleeping on the floor
Yeah.
in the house we were renting on my laundry bags. Because that's like all
Yeah.
I had. And I feel like everybody who's like an IAIA alumni has these stories of grinding and hustling to stay in that space because
Hmm.
it was always a conscious choice to stay in that space. Like even for me, like
Right.
I wanted to move home. Like I remember my first year of college, I was almost ready to move home every
Hmm.
weekend, but then I'd stay. So it was like we all have these stories of struggles and wanting to
Yeah.
stay there. And then you don't realize it until you're gone and you're like you talking about Micah, you talking about Laylee and all these people. And I remember them and I remember like, you know, being in classes and spaces with them. And I'm like, whoa, you know, we were in that at that moment.
Hmm.
And then for the hindsight clarity now, it's like me saying, oh, I was really privileged. But in those moments, it was really challenging at times.
Oh
Really
yeah,
challenging.
it definitely was. It was definitely challenging, and then really really amazing things happened where we started sharing those challenges. You know, I think that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about IA was that I was in a I was in a college in an academic environment where when I experienced challenges with just finances, just what I had access and the availability of and stuff, I was not shamed by
Hmm.
anyone.
True.
I was welcomed. I was people shared with me, and we got to really. That's how we sat in community with each other,
True.
and that's what sustained us. That's what kept us there. Because I had those same times too, where I felt very overwhelmed and
Hmm.
homesick, and I was like, you know, maybe it would just be easier to just go back home
Hmm.
and go to work and try something else, you know. And it was those times where I didn't feel shamed or left out because I was struggling. Instead, I was welcomed in.
Yeah.
And I had good friends and good people with me who were like, you know what? Yeah, I'm in the, we're all, you know, we're all in, how do I say it? We weren't all in the same boat. We all arrived in different boats,
Yeah. Yeah.
but, but we all shared that journey.
Yeah.
And so it became really good. And then other things happened too, where people who, were sometimes closer to home. You know, they would be like, well, we're having feast days, you know, come out to
Totally.
the Pueblo, come to my home.
Yeah.
I know you miss your family. I know you miss your mom and dad. Just
Hmm.
come say hello to mine. And it was that comfort. And it
Yeah.
was that space of like, I am where I'm supposed to be here and now. Like it's okay. It's going to be all right.
Yeah.
And, and so that was really good.
Yeah.
And, and I and so I loved it for that. I loved it for those times. And I don't I don't remember if I was an RA when your class came in. I think it was after you all came in,
Hmm.
but I became an RA while we were there at IA. And that was part of what I loved too, was that I got to like get to be a part of our community of students coming in and helping them to feel at home,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Because sometimes that's all it took. That's all it took was just like your fellow students saying like, hey, you know what, like
Yeah.
I know you're far away, let's go ahead and just be family while we're here.
Totally.
And we were, and it was real and it was beautiful.
It's true. Like everything you're describing, I think is why art school was so unique for me because after like me going to UVic and now at University of Saskatchewan and going to different universities, that environment never really replicated anywhere else for me. Like it was uniquely IIA. It was uniquely creatives and everyone trying to survive and thrive in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it's funny, like how you're describing it, it's just like on point. Like I think a lot of alumni and our friends will probably listen to this and be like, oh yeah. Because even like Daryl Lucero, right, behind the scenes on this podcast, he's from Isleta Pueblo and we became best friends. And yeah, he was always inviting me down to eat and chill and now we still are friends. And
Right.
you talking about Steve Wall and that whole dynamic. And yeah, like Uncle Steve, man, he's influential in my scholarship. You know, he's the reason I'm doing a
Right.
PhD. So it's just like you're describing everything here that does make me want to foster those types of spaces in the places I work. And I do think I remember you being an RA like the year I got there in the old dorms in that office space, because I always remember I didn't go down with a computer, and I always remember going into that old little pool rec room because there was a computer there, and it was like the communal computer, right?
Yeah.
Everyone was using like MySpace still at the time, and slowly switching over to Facebook. And I think that's when I first met you, and you were an RA. Yeah, you were an RA at that time.
Okay. Yeah. And, and just things like that. Like we had those shared spaces.
Mm-hmm.
We had those community spaces. And you know what? So I came back out here to New Mexico, like I said, just this year ago, and I've been away for years. Gosh, my little girl's getting ready to be 10 next month. And, I think the last time I was out here with her, she was maybe 1.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been quite a few years since I've seen a lot of different people. And since I've been out here, and then after I got fully vaccinated, of course, I got to reconnect with people, and it was seeing old friends, it was seeing Ginger and Chanupa,
mm-hmm.
and it was going out and visiting Rose, and visiting Vanessa, Maria, and seeing these friends that were, that it's been quite a while, and loving it, because it is like coming home. Yeah. I even went out. I had to go out to the IA campus at one point,
uh-huh.
and I had my daughter with me, and I realized she had never seen the campus.
Wow.
So I took her out with me, and it was kind of wild, like showing her, because I was like, you know what, all this place holds so many memories and so many beautiful things for me, and for her father too. He's alumni too.
Mm-hmm.
I met him while I was there at IA, and I even got married at IA. I got married in front of the library.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's like such a weird random story, but I technically got married in front of the library at IA.
Yeah.
But I was showing my daughter this, and all the new facilities and everything they have for students there, and it really it made me cry a little bit. I was so proud, because I remember when we were there and knowing how incredible the students work and what we're able to create, and really hoping that we would be able to expand and offer more to students,
mm-hmm.
and offer everything they could possibly dream of and want, and getting to go back to the campus and seeing that like those kinds of dreams came true for the students there. It made me really happy. It made me really proud. It made me very emotional. I was really thankful to see that. I was like, oh, good. They have this. Like, I remember when we kind of needed something like that there. Now they have it. It's ready. It's there. It's available. Good. Like, that was true. Comforting for me.
They have a gym now and everything, right? They have like mm-hmm. a workout facility. And I remember like I went down a few years ago, and I went for lunch with Daryl because he was teaching there. And I remember mm-hmm. some students talking about how they only serve healthy food there.
Oh, yeah. That's good though.
That was because I remember we had like all the fried food, remember?
Mm-hmm.
And it was mm-hmm. like shipped in by a company that does the federal grants that also took food to the prison.
Yeah. But I mean, at least we got to eat every day.
That's true.
That was it's funny because like you go back in different because you end up meeting alumni too from all different generations once you go to IA. And I remember meeting alumni who were there in like the 90s and stuff. They're like, hey, you guys got to eat every day. Good for you. And I'm like, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. IA's been growing for like decades. It's still growing. It's still like growing.
It is. It's still growing. And I think it's really, really amazing to see that happen. And also like, I guess, you grow into like a family while you're there, and then you have it for life. And like I said, you end up having kinship with other alumni, even if they're from a different generation, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of our professors while we were there was Linda Lomahaftua, and she mentored me. She became my friend. And I love her very deeply. She's always been very good to me, and she treats me as family. And I got to see her and create a coffee as well.
Wow.
Just recently, last month. And it was truly wonderful and a happiness for me to know that like these people who saw me through my like kind of not knowing exactly what I was going to do, but that I was going to do something, like young years of being a student. And it was really wonderful to get to like come and share space with them as fellow artists and contemporaries as I've matured in my own work. And that was amazing. That was amazing for me. You know, I don't think other people get to have those sorts of profound relationships with everyone that are educators to them.
That's totally true. Yeah, that is totally true, because the relationships I did foster with people at IAI who were faculty and staff have been pretty positive. And I know we're talking about our experiences, and I know some people have experiences with IAI that may not be the best, and you know, things happened, and I don't want to generalize people's experiences, but we're definitely highlighting, you know, the positives of what it was to go to school at that space.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, in that space.
Yeah, and it is like anything else. Like there's the negative too, you know, of course, but also like all I ever take away now is, especially after getting through our first year of a global pandemic, all my takeaways now are always the good things. Yeah, you know, it's those good things. It's those good memories that help you grow. Yeah. So and keep you going. So I guess that's maybe why the dialogue's sort of focused on those things right now.
I think it is, because I'm definitely like in a space too, like still, you know, coming out of the pandemic, and even with the compounded loss we've experienced with family and friends during the pandemic, it's like I'm thinking back, and it's really great to have this conversation with you, because it's like, oh yeah, this is part of who I am. This is part of the struggle that I've endured to get where I'm at today. And it's a really good reminder. Yeah, it's really great to have this conversation with you. I should interview more IA alumni or people who are doing art. I miss talking with creatives. Like I said, you know, they're a big part of my fostering my own path, and I miss having these types of conversations. And then I should even do a podcast, like when you were just talking about TC Cannon's work and all that. I should do a podcast on art and get someone on here to unpack that. I'll link some the links in the show notes so people could see TC Cannon's art, who's amazing, who was doing amazing art, and you know, ultimately passed away super young, and he was ahead of his time. And I mean, if we didn't even tell people he passed away, people would probably assume he was still alive today doing art just by looking at it. Yeah.
And really amazing, incredible, timeless work. That's what it is, you know.
I want to tie it back into you and highlight you a bit more from the wisdom you have now, because you know, you're dropping all these truth bombs, and it's really great to hear, and it's really amazing to hear you speak about how you got to where you are today in terms of, you know, the college you went to and things like that. And I know there's more we could talk about. If you could turn back time and talk to yourself when you were 18 years old, what would you tell yourself?
What would I tell young artist April? Art scenes are not real.
Art scenes are not real.
But when people talk about art and they talk about being like a part of a scene, you know, and sort of like it's kind of like it's a stereotype. It's not real. It's that illusion of like the hype of artist and that romanticized like lifestyle of artist and things and what you should be doing. And it's not real, you know? And I think when I was younger, I used to feel frustrated that like I couldn't get in on it, I guess, and like be a part of a scene. And then I got older and I realized like scenes they're not real. Yeah. What is real is that just in different times and space, like people create, and sometimes they do it collectively, sometimes they do it independently. And the point is to create, not who necessarily sees the work. The point is to create. So I guess if I could tell my younger self something, it'd be that it would just be like, just be happy creating, and you know, and don't worry about that scene. oddly enough, recently we lost our former professor and dear friend, Jeff Kam. And I remember something he told me while I was at IAA. He said, just make the work and it'll find its place.
Yeah.
And, and Jeff was such a really wonderful professor, and he was kind of like very straightforward about things.
Yeah.
And, I remember they were doing a exhibit of his work. That was when they were doing the faculty exhibits.
Mm-hmm.
And they had some of his work up, and I was looking at it, and I asked him that. I was like, what keeps you kind of going and doing what you're doing? He's like, just make the work and it'll find its place. And I was like, oh, that's thank you, Jeff. Thank you for telling me that. And then I continued on to tease him because he didn't paint the edges of his paintings. And he had just told me in class the day before, like, you have to paint the edges, otherwise the work's not finished. And so I started teasing him. I was like, you're the one bringing in unfinished work into these galleries. Like, so I don't know, Jeff. And, and he laughed about it because he was a good guy. He had a really good sense of humor.
Yeah.
And
he was. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And so it was great. Man, I don't think I could have gotten away with teasing our professors at any other school than that one.
Yeah.
When I think about it, just the silly things that we as students would say to professors, to our instructors, and they would just laugh and roll with it and be cool with us.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if other art schools are like that.
Yeah. I wouldn't know, but I do know that IA was unique. And then for even you, to talk about Jeff, because Jeff was one of my big pillars down there because he was really close friends with my late dad when he was growing up. And he always remembered my late dad as somebody who encouraged him and was really supportive of him and kind to him. So he returned that favor to me down there. And it's funny too, because some people said he was really a hard prof in some cases, right? But he was always nice to me. He was really supportive of what I did.
Yeah, I don't think he was really a hard ass teacher. He was very professional, and he really took he took his job very professionally and very responsibly. And so it was funny because when we would tease with him and finally get him laughing at something in class, it was like we all got a kick out of it. We were like, oh, we got Jeff to loosen up. Yes. We were so excited for it. And and I think about too, when he started teaching there, I think that was one of his when he first started teaching. So he was only so many years out from being pretty much an IA student himself. So I always appreciated how he did kind of share that that sort of empathy with us as students of I've been here before not too long ago. I know how it feels, and so he was really great about things that way. And oh man, and we all miss him.
Yeah, we do. We do. And, he was somebody that I really wanted to continue fostering a relationship with, but I've been so busy, and to hear about him pass, was just like a punch in the gut because he was one of the guys you always assumed was going to be there, creating. And he was actually we were planning on getting him on this podcast. He was on our guest list to reach out to.
Oh, he would have been great too.
Yeah. So when I heard, I was like, oh my God, he would have. Yeah, because I wanted him to talk about art because even locally here, he's from the next reserve over for me, and me knowing Jeff Kam, I know a lot of people never really got to even experience his creative process and watch him create because I remember visiting him in his studio, and I remember seeing his art, and I feel like he's a really his work's amazing. That's what I'm going to say is his work's amazing and people need to look at it and see it because it was intrinsically Cree for me while at the same time moving our people forward into the direction we need to go.
Yeah.
That's how I describe it. Yeah.
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 Yeah. It was just such a really amazing person. And and how do I say it? In a weird way, I like that even that hurt and that mournfulness for him, I don't share alone. Like I do have other alumni, other IA people that share that with me, and that's comfort in itself too. So,
yeah. And like I was thinking about it too, like because it comes in waves. Like I feel like my grief's compounded right now with this pandemic. Like I feel like if it's over, I'm probably just gonna be like fall apart because, you know, I still got to work. We still kind of got to move forward. We're still actively dealing with the pandemic, right? And every time it comes up, and I just reflect on it too. I think about how many artists Jeff has worked with and fostered, right? So there's like this continuation, and everyone has this common link where, you know, he's worked with a lot of emerging and influential artists today. So his presence is out there. His and it's really cool when I think about it in that way too.
And you know, we all shared community with each other. You know, it wasn't just his presence as an artist or as an instructor. He was our friend. he was our friend. And
he was.
And even when we were at IA too, we lost friends. You know, we lost students that were friends to us, and we all shared that experience too in our young lives while we were there. And I think about that now and how it was hurtful and it was, you know, overwhelming, but also we had each other to get through it. And, and that's really wonderful too. And I'm not, like I said, I there's so many times where I'm like, I don't think I could handle that same experience if I was in any other environment. Like it took being there at IA for us to just sort of, survive and grow together too. And those things shape our art. So those experiences shape our art. And it's I'm thankful for all of that, if that makes you know, I'm thankful for all of it. Also, it's just wonderful to hear your voice, Mylan. Like, it's really wonderful to hear your voice. And I feel like that too. Like, you know, like you said, like we start talking about, and we're like, oh yeah, I remember so-and-so and everything. And, you know, it's like, it just feels good to hear our friends' voices. And, and we're all in a weird space in life right now, like with the pandemic. So I don't know if that's just amplified how much we recognize to appreciate one another or what, but it's definitely appreciated.
Yeah, same. Likewise, for sure. And then I do remember you because I do remember, you know, being really welcoming and supportive when I was down there, and I was struggling at the time. Like my first semester at IA was really hard, my first year, because there was even like financial questions. I think I went down when there was like an economic, you know, collapse, when there, like the recession happened and people were pulling their monies out of bank accounts in Santa Fe that weren't insured and stuff. And I was like, I don't know if I can be down here. But I remember like, the community and definitely, you know, people a few years ahead of me were really supportive and really welcoming. And we didn't even talk about the humble.
Oh yeah. Micah Rizal, who else? Micah Rizal, Kshnipa, Matt Soodle, Rose, like all of them, you know. We were all part of it, and the humble was cool. The humble was like an amazing little spin-off from IA.
Yeah, it was so unique.
And that was cool too, because I think that was where we learned that there's like the development of who we are as artists at the school, in that environment, and then who we are on our own terms. And we all, like, that's why we kind of moved together as a collective. It was, we still need our community and our reassurance and our collective cultivating of our own, you know, who we are as artists. And now I look at it all these years later, and like I look at, like, you know, like Rizal, and I look at Micah and Cougar and everyone, and I'm just like, oh man, I'm so proud of them.
Yeah.
I'm so proud that like we got to share that time there together. And then look at what we've gone on to do. Oh my gosh. Like it's just, it really like hits me hard where I'm just like, wow, I got to see them in those first stages of like growing in those directions. And it's all coming to fruition. And you just, like it makes you proud. It just makes you proud.
It does. It does. Like I remember me being like a first year and going to like the humble events and just being like, holy shit, this is badass. Like just that your collective, that I know you said there's not an art scene, but for me at that time in my paradigm, that was like, oh, this is so cool. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it was like you all were doing so much, and that was, contrary to what people assume, the art world is. Like y'all were just creating and stepping out of the box of even like spaces that were allotted. Like y'all went off campus and just did stuff.
Right.
Like you just created your own spaces, and I was like, that's badass.
Oh, that's so weird. Like, because I said like I would have told myself there was no art scene, and then the way you describe it, maybe that's why I don't view it as an art scene, because we acted like family.
Yeah,
that's probably what it is. Like I didn't even occur to me till you just said that just now. I'm like, oh, that's probably why I don't view things as art scenes. Like it's family.
Yeah,
that's what it felt like, and that's what it was. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. We were also crazy punk rock, like art student kids just winging it.
Y'all were punk rockers. I wasn't.
Cool. Yeah. We were like, oh, your friend has a band. They want to play here. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. We'll find an amp. We'll figure out how to do this, Yeah.
And I remember the space just being like welcoming, because I remember like in the evenings, like literally, like it's 11:30 here right now. Literally art school would still be doing stuff right now. Like everyone would still be working or grinding or doing something. I remember like me and Daryl and like Dylan and some other friends, we would just go to the humble, and it was just like a welcoming space, and everyone was creative and talking, or people were out eating or at a movie. Like I don't think we generally went to bed till like 2 or 3 in the morning on like school nights.
Oh, I miss Dylan. Somewhere I have a picture of me and Micah standing outside of the studio smoking, and like you could barely see in like the corner in the background, Dylan's like walking out of one of the doors. And and we loved you guys. Like, that was like the cool part about it. It was like, show up and hang out. And last year I got to see Keith Grossbeck.
Yeah.
Which I haven't seen him in years. And it was just like, it was like, oh, remember like those 2 times we would just have like random dance parties at the humble and stuff. And it was like, that was great. That was fun. That was like some of the best parts of what we all shared together,
Yeah, it was. And there was so much
time we were making art too.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
It'd be like we have a random dance party going, but then at the same time there's someone, painting,
literally
and
painting,
then passing it off to another person, and whatever.
There's so much purpose to it. Like that's how I described it. Was like I was a nerd. Like I wasn't really big on partying at all, but like the humble was, to me, was like there was so much purpose to people coming together. There was value in it. There was family in it, and it was just like, it wasn't like a college party, like in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like the continuation of the day at art school. Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. I remember us doing like just fun things where it would be like, oh, someone started this wood panel or canvas or whatever, and I painted so much. Okay, I'm passing it off to you. Your turn. And we kind of like it would just like circle around the room, and we would have things that we worked on together. Or when we did we did like a salon show at Warehouse 21.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just all of us kind of like lined up painting where we could, wherever, on this piece. And we'd look over and be like, oh yeah, that looks awesome, dude. Oh, this looks great. Like, and it wasn't about us as individuals of what it was really truly about like what we were creating together.
Yeah.
And it felt so good. It felt so right to do that kind of work,
It did. And like I'm not a painter. Like I don't paint, and I didn't paint, but I remember being in the space and I just think about like how much that space influenced me and how much those support systems influenced me. And just like even Chanupa being welcoming every time I saw him in the studio and just talking story in those moments, like, whoa, you know, like that was an epic little conversation we had about process and creativity, and everyone would go out and smoke, and I wouldn't smoke, but that's sort of the spot where everyone is having these epic conversations, you know, like behind the studios. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Oh, some of us were terrible chain smokers. I was a terrible chain smoker. I gave that up, and I'm happy I did. But that did make for facilitating some great conversations.
Yeah. So totally awesome. Well, yeah. Thanks for sitting down with me and having this conversation. We could talk for hours. We could talk about more stuff. Maybe we should get you on some art stuff again in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to specifically talk about or mention on the platform?
You know, I don't know if it's necessarily like in reference to everything we've discussed already, but I just want to tell you, I really appreciate that this is like the direction you've taken, Mylan, at you and Daryl both. Like, I think that's amazing, and you guys are doing wonderful work.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks. That means a lot hearing it from you. And I know Daryl's doing his grind. He's doing his community work and his nonprofit work too. I'm in my grind here in my community, still doing a PhD. But yeah, thanks. I really appreciate it.
Get it, Mylan. Like, make us proud.
Slowly but surely. I'm like the snail. Yep. I'm the snail, but I'm getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any shout outs you want to give before we go?
Oh, big shout out to the Three Sister Collective of Santa Fe.
Nice.
They're brilliant, creatives, artists, community builders, good, loving people that have welcomed me and made me truly feel at home in their people's space and homelands. So big shout out and love to them. Big shout out and love to all of our humble family, wherever we find them, anywhere on this beautiful earth. And of course to all the IAIA alumni, like lots of love and shout outs to them.
Yeah. I think a lot are going to listen to this podcast to get nostalgic.
Yeah.
If you're nostalgic, reach out to me. Maybe we could have you on the podcast and talk story.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's great. Awesome, April. I really appreciate your time and everything we talked about. And we'll be in touch and keep doing what you're doing too, because I follow you on social media and you're vocal, you're creating, and everything you're saying and doing is on point, and it's awesome to see. It motivates me too.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate that. Thank you.
Awesome. No problem. Thanks for sitting with me, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye.